Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues as well. Today we're going to talk about the World Energy Outlook. In fact, the International Energy Agency, that is IEA, has recently released its World Energy Outlook 2022 report, which stated that global emissions will peak in 2025. This report explores key questions about the crisis, including setbacks for clean energy transitions, government responses on energy markets, and possible risks ahead on the path to net zero emissions. Now, talking specifically about India, the 524-page report says that the primary challenge for India is going to be about meeting its rising electricity demand. Citing government programs like Gati, Shakti National Master Plan and the Atmanirbhar Bhart scheme, along with strong economics, it says that India will see a robust growth in renewable and electric mobility, notably for two- and three-wheeler segment. Now, the World Energy Outlook report also states that the global energy crisis sparked by the Ukraine conflict is having far-reaching implications for entire economies, promoting short-term responses from governments as well as a deeper debate about the ways to promote energy security. So we'll try and understand what does this report say and why is energy security so important, so crucial to us, what's happening and what is likely to happen in the next decade or so. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Mr. Deepak Shriram Krishnan is joining us. He's the Associate Director Energy with WRI, that's his World Resources Institute India. Mr. Ajay Shankar is also with us. He's a distinguished fellow with TERI. And Urmi Goswami, senior journalist, is also joining us. Welcome, all of you, to Sansad Television. I'll start with you, Urmi, because I would like you to, sort of encapsulate or summarize the report. Also, make us understand why the World Energy Outlook, which is, this kind of report which is brought out by IEA, is significant.
So the World Energy Outlook report is the annual flagship report of the IEA, which basically gives a sense of where we are in terms of energy demands, energy consumption patterns. And of course, more recently, it also is a good tracker, and the IEA itself has, in many ways transition, looking at the energy transition. So it's a good spotlight into, like, a good insight as to the broader trends. It also brings in other factors that play into global energy demands, looking at it in disaggregated ways in terms of geography. So it's an important document. It gives you not only a sense of where you are as a country, as a region, but also globally looking at the trends. So I think that's what makes the World Energy Outlook of the report of the IEA so important. Mm-hmm. In this, the current edition of the report is, of course, comes at a time when the world's dealing with this energy crisis, which is, of course, partly and largely the result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the use of course, first the European Union deciding to go off Russian gas, or at least having a pathway to go off Russian gas, then Russia sort of using gas as a weapon, and then, of course, Europe looking literally at some level helter-skelter at one level, but because they can't afford to pay a higher price of buying, gas, LNG from wherever they could, which basically disrupted supplies in other parts of the world. So clearly there is a crisis, and this crisis is located in another crisis, which is the climate crisis. And Europe, which is the center, sort of the first point of this energy crisis, was already trying to put in place its transition to a low carbon economy. Mm-hmm. Though to be very clear, for Europe, gas was a transition fuel at that point. Though the IEA now says, if you look at the World Energy Outlook report, it says gas can no longer be thought of as a transition fuel. That's the outcome of this of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Okay.
But in the European Union's imagination and its policies, if you look at its taxonomy, gas is also classified as green. So it is still it is a transition fuel for it.
Okay.
And therefore, how it kind of impacts this crisis, how it has sort of played out. And what we are seeing is that as Europe is trying to put in place policies, which hopefully will sort of push it along towards faster transition or accelerate its transition away from fossil fuels.
Okay.
So, which is why when Dr. Fatih Birol, the head of the IEA, when he introduced the report yesterday, he said it very clearly. This is truly the first global energy crisis. The previous crisis that everybody refers to, the oil crisis, the petro shock,
okay,
it did affect. But remember that the use of fossil fuel at that point wasn't as pervasive, and the way this is playing out is much wider.
Okay, indeed.
So the other thing he says is that, which is again a critical, interesting point, is that instead of this crisis will actually push us towards, it actually will help push us towards a cleaner fuel, because it raises the issue of energy security. So those are the two broad things. And I think the India conversation, which I know you'll come back, we'll come back to later.
Yeah, we'll come to that part.
Could be situated in that context.
Okay, we'll come to that part. India's positioning situation and how we perceive this entire situation here. But first, looking at the larger picture, and Mr. Shankar, I'd like to bring you in here. As Urmi was explaining wonderfully in terms of the kind of picture which has been portrayed by the World Energy Outlook report in terms of the challenges we have, and in terms of the inherent opportunities here as well to move towards cleaner gas or cleaner fuel regime from here onwards. How do you analyze the key aspects of this particular report and the way it projects the way forward?
The first thing to note about the report is that it clearly states that whatever governments have announced, the world is well set to cross 1.7 degree global warming against the necessity of sticking to 1.5 degrees. And we are already seeing the disastrous consequences of the global warming that has already occurred. So I think the key takeaway from that lesson, from the report, is that unless the advanced economies move very rapidly away from fossil fuels, we are headed for disaster. I think the report glosses over the inaction of the advanced economies and puts it that the present energy crisis may be creating an opportunity for a faster transition. The second point which he makes, and that it may create an opportunity for a faster transition, has two dimensions. One is that in the short run, because of the non-availability of gas, Europe is going to use coal, increase the use of coal in the short run. The second point it makes is, as a consequence, many countries in the developing world would be thinking of putting up new coal-fired plants. Now, coal-fired plants have very long gestation period, and they're lumpy investments. So whoever invests in a coal-fired plant would not like to shut it up after 4 or 5 years. The other worrying implication is that because of Europe having suddenly blocked the supply of gas from Russia, is looking at creating greater LNG capacity for meeting its gas needs in the coming years. Now, LNG terminals are again a very lumpy, locked-in investment. And when you invest there, you'd like to prolong the life of that investment. And the world has not moved aggressively enough on climate change, though the advanced countries have had the resources, the technology, and the capacities, is because of the enormous power of the fossil fuel industry and its ability to shape public opinion and its ability to somehow persuade political leaders that you need not do anything just now. So if you look at the US, the Republicans even today do not believe that they need to do anything on climate change. So if they start getting control of the Congress in the coming election, then whatever US could do has already happened through Biden's act, where some $400 billion will go for clean energy. Thereafter, till the next election, and thereafter, I don't know what the US will do. And if the US does not do enough, then the rest of the world, the prospects become far more pessimistic. So I see this report, reading between the lines, as a wake-up call for the entire civil society in the world that it's getting too late to save mankind. And we need to act far more aggressively. Now, one final point in this round is that because gas and coal prices in the international market have become so exorbitantly high, there are multiple of what they used to be. So, and that is where I think the IEA hints at, that the economics in favor of renewable energy and storage and EVs has become that much stronger and stronger across the world. So if you look at our own experience in India, the recent tenders show that renewable energy plus storage is comparable to fossil fuel-based electricity generation for meeting round-the-clock demand. Now, these conclusions emerged before coal prices went in the international market from $80 to $103, $150, $400. So the case for a faster energy transition for an energy importing country like India on a purely commercial basis, forget climate change, is so much stronger. But we remain often rooted in past mindsets. So I think the first change India has to do is to forget about increasing the share of gas in the energy.
Indeed. That's a very important part. We'll come to India aspect there, Mr. Shankar, a little while later. But Mr. Krishnan, the Energy Outlook report, the World Energy Outlook report, looks at two models. One is the stated policies scenario, and the other is announced pledges scenario as well. And the two are entirely different. So we see, the estimates or the kind of outlook which has been put forward in various measures. If you could make our viewers understand what are we talking about here in terms of the pledges and in terms of the stated policies, how much is the gap or the difference?
Sure. So firstly, thank you for having me on this show. So the stated policy scenario is more like a very, very base case scenario, just building on policies that countries have announced, and already there may be schemes or regulations built around that. And if the trajectory is built around just those policies, we get the stated policies emission scenario that IEA projects. Now, the interesting thing about this edition of the Outlook is that even in the stated policy scenario, we are seeing a plateauing of fossil fuel use. But the same report itself goes on to acknowledge that that is not enough, and we are definitely going to cross the 2-degree threshold in such a scenario. And therefore come the other two scenarios, of which the middling scenario is the announced pledges. So as you know, different countries under the Paris Agreement of 2015 have had to submit nationally determined contributions, and few of them have also updated them, just before the Glasgow edition last year. It is expected that more will continue to update. India themselves made a updated submission a couple of months back, where we said that we would meet 50% of our electricity demand from non-fossil fuel sources. We also committed to reducing our emissions intensity by a further 10% from our earlier NDC announcement. So these announced policies are a kind of next step, if I may use that term, wherein you are looking at a slightly higher ambition, but at the same time, this is also not enough. You would definitely find an improvement over the stated policies, and you would find much more reduction in fossil fuel consumption and peaking of emissions as compared to the stated policy scenario. But even this isn't enough, and that's where the net zero emissions scenario, which is the third and the most ambitious scenario that the report talks about, that's what is going to keep us limited to that 1.5 degree scenario, which is the safety threshold. Now, achieving that is going to take real serious effort, significant international cooperation, a significantly higher phase down of fossil fuels, coupled with a near simultaneous increase in clean energy usage, energy efficiency. You also have to abate the emissions of sectors like iron and steel, cement, in chemicals and typically what is known as the hard to abate sectors, electrify all possible load. So these are some of the things which all countries need to act in concert. Finance flows have to be up to the promised levels which developed countries have been committing to. International cooperation on usage of the critical minerals that we are going to need for the clean energy transition must be smooth. Global trade must flourish for that. So a lot of very ambitious thinking and actions that need to be taken. So these are the three.
Okay. Indeed, a lot of work needs to be done there by all stakeholders to achieve those targets. But Urmi, shifting the focus back to India, and looking at it from the report's perspective as well, what this report says in terms of where we stand. The second largest coal producer in 2021, overtaking Australia and Indonesia. Electricity being the biggest challenge in terms of meeting the demand, but also a very positive outlook in terms of the policies which have been adopted, specifically when we're talking about the renewable energy sector or the e-mobility. Those seemingly are the key two words.
Right. I mean, the IEA report, whether it's the World Energy Outlook or even previous reports where they had the India Outlook, does have a very positive outlook on India, primarily also because it is true that our sort of ambitions when it comes to renewable is actually quite is noteworthy, and it's not just an ambition that we have put down on paper, but we are acting on it. The interesting part about, when IEA or anybody else does these reports is they look at what policies A are announced and B, whether they're announced internationally. In some cases, they only look at what we put in the NDCs. In some cases, they look at, policies that are already in place. There's a lot of things that get, left off by the wayside. Of course, in this report, we see that there's a reference to the fact that India is trying to work towards a carbon market, energy efficiency in buildings, then the push for hydrogen, all of that is there. What I see when I look at this report is that when it comes to India, it's still an incomplete picture, and it's nobody's fault actually but our own, because we ourselves are still sort of our policies are still a work in progress, and there is no broader vision that's put out there which somebody can draw on to say, okay, this is where India wants to go in such and such time. This is the kind of things that they want to put in place, and now let's wait to see if they're taking the next steps, that is putting policy, laws, regulations in place to fulfill that. So, I mean, if you take the net zero sort of issue, India has said that it wants to achieve net zero, by which very clearly is GAG net zero, that's climate neutrality by 2070. That's all greenhouse gases by 2070. But we still don't really know. If you ask anybody, most people won't be able to tell you exactly what is it that India is doing to get there. These are all a bit of guesses, a bit of reading the tea leaves that's happening. And I think that's part of the problem. And that becomes the infirmity. And India is not the only country which is doing that. There are many other countries who are probably doing the same thing, not putting all of it out there for reasons which are tactical, maybe reasons because they haven't worked it out, reasons because they don't have the capacity to work it out. So therefore, in a sense, the World Energy Outlook and reports like that always remain indicative. You get a sense of where the world is going. It's a good way to, get your act together.
To understand on a larger scale.
Yeah, what you see when you look at the Indian story is that you see they're saying by 2030 our energy demand will outstrip, because of rising energy demand. So therefore, our coal usage will rise. What is it that we can do looking at that to rectify that? Because the move away, to put in place efforts to move away. What are we doing in terms of the IEA report actually talks about critical minerals, because that's going to be the next sort of frontier of next race. So what is it that India is doing? I also think when you look from an Indian perspective, India should see it as the opportunities. I know that there is the politics of climate change, and I've spent a fair bit of time covering that, so I do appreciate the politics of it.
Indeed.
But then there is the real world pragmatic view.
Okay.
This is our moment where we can actually make opportunities.
And cash in on them as well.
Exactly. So then how do we use innovation? How do we use our research capabilities? The fact that we have huge scale to work it in our favor. I think that are the lessons that we should need to take, leadings that we need to take from this report.
Okay. Mr. Ajay Shankar, in terms of what Urmi was referring to, what is it that exactly we are doing, India is doing in terms of, securing energy security from both perspectives, from our own, national interest as well as the larger global interest when we are talking about tackling the issue of climate change? Because as per this report and the indications coming in, we are moving ahead, and looks like we are moving ahead on a right path. But as Urmi says, a bit more push, perhaps?
I would put it somewhat differently. I think when the Prime Minister addressed the Glasgow summit last year, the increase in the scale of our ambition took everybody by surprise in India as well as the rest of the world. I think that the increase in the scale of our ambition for 2030 is about the highest that was announced in Glasgow. And that said, that 500 GW of renewable energy capacity or non-fossil fuel capacity compared to 300 something that we have. Now, this kind of transition, no country announced. Similarly on energy efficiency, etc., etc. And this 2030 is an achievable target. I think government is working systematically in that direction. Details are being fleshed out. And if we achieve 2030 goals announced by the Prime Minister, we would be in the forefront in the world on making the energy transition. Now, we have also been forward-looking in announcing a hydrogen mission well before objective factors would have suggested that it is required. Because the hydrogen mission and its success will bring us in a position by, say, 28, 25, 2030, 32, 34, on how to take care of the energy transition in sectors which cannot be electrified. And the success in electric mobility is already there before our eyes, in two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and now we are seeing it four-wheelers. So we'll be seeing two parallel transitions, electrification of transport and decarbonization of electricity, and the two will converge to give us zero emissions in both transport and electricity far earlier than most projections indicate as of now. So I think India is a real, on the global frontier of this transition. We should take pride in what we are doing and what we are attempting. I think the rest of the world will take some more time to recognize all that we are doing.
Okay. Indeed, we're in the right path, doing the right things. Mr. Krishnan, a quick concluding comment from you on what India is doing and how it's moving ahead.
Sure. I'll just add on to what Urmi and Dr. Shankar mentioned. So one is, of course, the renewable energy goals and the hydrogen mission. In addition, India is also taking cognizance of the fact that the geopolitics of this transition is a reality. So you have the production-linked incentive scheme for manufacturing solar, so as to reduce dependence on primarily Chinese imports. You also have offshore wind bids being talked about, and that's untapped. Virtually right now we have 0 megawatts of offshore wind in India, and if you just take the coasts of Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, you have about 70 gigawatts of untapped energy which we can bring in. So that's another step that the government is taking. But in the midst of all this, there are also some areas where definitely more action can be taken. For example, if we talk about India's solar story, it's all about large utility scale plants. The rich potential of distributed solar, which can democratize energy across all consumers, right from the smallest household to a large factory, that is still at its infancy. Our discoms, that is the distribution companies, financials are a real concern, and something needs to be done. There have been multiple financing schemes that have been announced, but definitely it is a lot of significant political economies involved in the electricity distribution sector. So it's akin to a leaking bucket where you might pour all the clean energy sources, but there is a significant drain. So that is something which we also need to set right as we move along
ahead.
this clean energy pathway.
Okay.
And one last point I would also like to add is that even as we navigate the clean energy pathway, it is important to realize that at the end of the day, these large-scale projects are an infrastructure project, say a 2,000 megawatt solar plant or a 4,000 megawatt solar plant. So it shouldn't happen that while setting these plants up, we again repeat the mistakes in terms of depriving landowners of rightful compensation, depriving people of socioeconomic benefits, and that's another aspect which is going to come into as part of the just transitions. Only one component of the just transition.
Indeed. All that will have to
done,
be.
But
all that will have to be looked into, and it will have to be a concerted effort on all fronts there. Thank you so much, Deepak Krishnan, Mr. Ajay Shankar, and Urmi Goswami as well for sharing your views and insight with us and our viewers here, as well as our experts were pointing out and explaining the intricacies or the details of the World Energy Outlook report, which is coming from the IEA, not only in terms of the global vision, but also the Indian situation and the way India is tackling the challenges of energy security and moving on to more cleaner sources of energy. We'll keep a close watch and keep on bringing you detailed analysis of all key national and international issues. Keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.